There's just something about the look of this front. Could be this nice semi-translucent dark door with this almost gold painted plastic, but it's got that sort of gray, goldy silver color, shiny buttons, and the wood grain. Oh, the wood grain. It's got a few scuffs in it, but lordy, is that beautiful. Picked this up at a thrift store. There was a whole bunch of machines there actually. This was just the nicest looking one, or the coolest looking one, if you will. And I picked this up at a different thrift store. Same day. I think same day. Or the next day, whatever, close enough. And I believe this is the matching remote. At least it seems to control all the functions perfectly. That flashing that you're seeing is on the camera. It's not actually happening in real life. It could just be, let's see if I bring the light up. Yeah, I think it's just the exposure adjusting. It gets crazier the more light I bring in, and is less pronounced that way. Whatever. Anyway, what's interesting about this remote is it's the same model remote for the PV-1335 I did a video on a while ago. Oh, by the way, I found the remote for the PV-1335. So yeah, this had an unusual problem. I for sure was expecting the belts to be bad, and the idler tire is very worn, it's cracked, but it works just great. So it should be replaced, but for demonstration purposes, it's fine. Pinch roller makes a bit of a weird sound, but doesn't seem to cause any tape chewing. The belts are okay. The problem was the tensioner band for the supply reel. So there's that little arm that comes out, and depending on the tension of the tape pushing on the arm will control how much tension the band puts on the supply reel to keep the tape nice and tight around the video head. So it's like a feedback loop. And that was, the grease on that was completely dried up. So it moved real slowly and didn't really provide enough, because there's a spring on it, didn't really provide enough spring tension. So the picture was all messed up. Now to take this apart, or to take the top cover off at least, there's 2 screws on the back. In addition to that, you have 2 screws on one side and then 1 screw on the other. So I'll just bring up here and show you. There isn't one here because of this control. I'll show you in a bit. But there's one here. So they have the arrows, and they actually bite into this top panel here. There we go. Once those screws are out, just slides back and up. Very similar design to Panasonic's of this time. That Sylvania top loader I have does the same thing. Pretty sure the other Panasonic does. Yeah. So, take a look inside here. It's your standard 2-head, nothing fancy. Let's see if I can get some light in here. Take a look at this idler so you can see what I'm talking about. That is cracked, but it doesn't matter, still works. Looked on the bottom side, belts are fine. Here's your loading motor with the loading belt, and power supply. It's pretty packed, the circuitry in the back here. It's all powered up. I got my tuner working. Some of these stations are having interference problems. My city recently shrunk down the range of UHF stations for TV. I believe it's a Canada-wide thing to coincide with what the US is doing. They're selling off more of the UHF bands, so I think it's channel 14 to 20, and then the 50s and 60s. At any rate, now I got to squeeze everything into a smaller band and avoid things like this. I'm pretty sure this is global, coming in and messing with my signal. So yeah, some of them aren't so good. This one does though. Weather channel's always good. Okay, let's try a tape. You can watch the loading. And we'll hit play. Well, actually, first let's hit rewind. Excellent speed. Good grip. Same thing with fast forward. Loading works well. Picture is excellent. Fast forward scan. Nice and fast. Oops. Rewind. Same thing. If I want to hit pause, I mean, it's a two-head machine. It's interesting, the vertical's rolling. I need to see, some of these machines will have a vertical adjustment on them, a vertical hold. Well, I just checked no. So the one time I could ever consider myself needing a vertical hold adjustment on a VCR, it's not there. That's great. So we can unpause it. And let's just rewind a little bit. Check the counter out. Again, that flashing is something that the camera's picking up. I believe with the way it addresses, this is one of those VFD setups, and I believe it actually pulses each of the displays to save on essentially the controller that turns each one of these segments on. They just multiplex them, so they'll have like a frequency, so each one will turn on for X division of a second, and then they'll just have a clock pulsing through, say 8. So you can take, say there's 30 different segments here that can turn on. Well, you can divide that by a third, and they're just going 1, 2, 3, or an eighth, or whatever they do. I don't know the specs, but basically you can do more with less, which is what manufacturing's all about. So nice. I like the orange color of the display on these Panasonics. It's very satisfying. So here we go. Some previews and dropouts on a worn out tape. Now, this adjustment on the side that I showed earlier is a sharpness control. So let's take a look here. And other machines that I've used, the sharpness control barely does anything. Like you'll barely notice anything, or you don't need to, because it's very consistent and you always have it in the middle. On these two-head Panasonics, I've noticed that they're very soft on SP pre-recorded tapes. So I like to crank the sharpness way up, and it just makes for a real crisp, wonderful picture. But at the same time, on SLP recorded tapes, it's way too sharp, and you almost want to bring it down just a little bit below the halfway set point. So normally I think these sharpness controls are completely useless, but in this case, good thing to have. Speaking of controls on the front, it's pretty bog standard here. Here, record speed, slow tracking, and regular playback tracking. Let's look at the remote. So unpause, and then I can hit slow. Now this is where the slow tracking comes in, so I can adjust it. A little bit. Never been able to figure out the slow tracking to get it to show up just right here. It's about as good as she's gonna get right there. Stable picture. Anyway, go back to play, and I can hit frame advance, which is just pause. You see it just pulses that icon there for a second, moves along, and yeah. And unlike modern machines, you can't just hit play to unpause. You have to hit pause to unpause. Oops, hit pause again. And yeah, very, very simple machine. Not much to it at all. Let's watch it eject. Very smooth. So now let's try the forgotten middle child of recording speeds. LP. So you see it defaults when it doesn't have a tracking pulse to SP. Finds the tracking pulse. And there we go. I really have a vertical roll on here. So let's bring the tracking in. That vertical roll is surprising. Wondering if maybe some of the circuitry on this is starting to go. Pause. We'll do a slow. I think I have to do slow from play. Let's see. Pause. Slow. Yes, I do. Sounds like a jackhammer at a construction site. Or a pile driver or something. Let's go back.
Potential for financial success is
fast forward scan. Nice and fast. Wonderfully fast.
Washes more dishes.
Let's clean up the tracking on the bottom there. More fast forward.
are featured in chapter.
All right. Let's try some SLP. I love that bang sound that these older Panasonics make when they switch into a mode.
You can be part of Tony's Team Tigers. Just practice hard and start with a complete breakfast, including the great taste of Kellogg's Frosted
Just the
Flakes
tracking
cereal.
here, right in the middle.
Do your best on Tony's Team. I drank it. Bring out the...
Nice looking pause. Good line on there. Try slow. See, when I switch between the modes, that band of noise comes back. And I'm wondering if it might still be a slight alignment with the video head, or the tensioner band is maybe sticking just a little bit again. It's going to need a little bit of work, but excellent picture in all three speeds. Like, this is a very, I guess, probably low use machine. It's got a great picture. Good fast forward. Good rewind. There's a bit of tracking that shows up on the bottom again too. There we go.
Hold on tight for a mind-throbbing, three-dimensional thrill ride through the universe.
Here's something I just want to comment on. Watch the speed. I'm just paused right now. I'm going to hit fast forward. Now watch as the speed of fast forward changes when it goes from SP to LP to SLP. LP, SLP, SP, SLP. I like that. I know some very old models would just have one speed of scan for everything. Did want to do a comparison of this between this is the PV-1331 and the PV-1335 I did a video on a while back. And this is from 1984, and this is 2 years later in 1986. These are both fairly bog standard basic machines, 2-head, push button tuning. I think they're both 14 presets. They have, I believe, the same remote. If they don't have the same remote, they have a very similar remote. I know this is the correct remote for this machine.
They're not the same. They're different. This is the one for the VCR in the video you're watching now, or at least I think it is. This is the VSQ S0262. And this is the one that I know for sure is for the PV-1335. It is the VSQS0332. It's a higher number. See, it's got these nice arrows for the channel up and down. And the pause and frame advance buttons are moved around, which makes sense because you're more likely to use the scan than frame advance. It's also got the X2 button on there because the 1335 has the double speed playback. So I was wrong. They're not identical. They just feel identical. Woodgrain.
Couldn't find any information on what the correct remote for this one is. It's probably just this remote, but a slightly older styling. So yeah, very basic remote machines. But look at the footprint from up top here. This takes up so much less depth. And the PV-1225, which I believe is from 1984, is a top loader, and I believe it's just the top loading version of this one, because when it came out in 84 it had less depth. This is a lot closer in footprint to the 1983 models, but I believe you could get the shorter depth top loading model or the deeper front loading model for your sort of budget VCRs. I like the look of this one way better. It's got that beautiful sort of retro styling. Well, actually comparing this, the 1984 Panasonic, to the 1983 top loading Sylvania. Sylvania is just a hair taller, but it's the same depth, the same width. Here's a look at the inside difference. So other than this being a front loader and this being a top loader, they took all the circuit boards that used to be along the bottom. So in this 83 top loader, you see this circuit board runs all the way to the center, and then there's another circuit board that runs here. And there's that complicated way of swinging them out to get at the mechanism and the belts, and this area is just the mech. And then you have the power supply in the corner. They split it all up. So you have your tuning circuit up here, your power supply is on this board by itself, there's another board stacked underneath, and then there's all these circuit boards at the back. But you can even see the vent on the bottom there. This is completely exposed when you take the bottom cover off, which is a vast improvement for serviceability. Speaking of the underside, let's take a look in here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws. Here it is. Very simple. You have that circuit board sitting behind the power supply circuit board. And here is the underside. Got one belt that drives the idler off of the direct drive capstan motor. Here's your head drum. And here's your motor that moves the loading mechanism in and out. All sorts of fancy gears and cam gears and whatnot. Both these belts are good. They are just fine. This thing just worked. Just needed a cleaning. You know what? Let's hit play. Is there a tape in here? There is. Let's hit play. Let's watch what happens. Also, this is back when electronics were hefty, and when you carried them, the manufacturers actually provided these little carry handles on the side. And these early Panasonics had that, and I really appreciate it because they weigh a substantial amount. Yeah, lots of metal. Nice big metal chassis for the mechanism. Lots of metal parts moving things into metal. Metal hitting metal and making a bang sound. There's a bit of plastic. There's not a lot of plastic. There's a bit. Despite it looking weird here, this tensioner band is actually in good shape. What you're seeing here is it's a dual purpose. So this is also the braking mechanism. So there isn't a separate, oh, there is a separate brake there. What? Then why is there a brake here and here? What? On this side there's only one. Maybe someone who knows more than me can answer why there's two here.